African Designers Remembering Our Past in Our Present in collaboration with New York by Design. My name is Alana Francis de Govaya, and I'm the Chief Programs and Experience Officer at the Africa Center in Harlem, New York City. Thank you so much for joining us today for this conversation between three exceptional designers of African descent. I'm joined today by Mulaney Barnett, who will be moderating the discussion. She's an artist, activist, and the founder of Black Artists and Designers Guild. Our two speakers are Ghanaian-American fashion designer Mimi Plange and Ethiopian-American furniture designer Jomo Tariku. At the Africa Center, our work is focused on transforming narratives about Africa by centering human stories of the continent and its people in contemporary culture, policy, and business. We are bringing this program to you to explore the role of design in the lives of people of African descent. And we really hope that you'll find it interesting and informative. Please be sure to follow the speakers to keep updated and support their work. You can also keep in touch with us at the Africa Center by following us at the Africa Center on all of our social media platforms. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Mulaney.
Thank you, Alana, for the introduction. Thank you to the Africa Center for having us today and for NYC by Design for hosting this conversation. I'm really excited to share the work of Mimi Plange and Jomo Tariku. I actually, besides knowing their work, I know them personally, and they're just wonderful people. So Mimi, before we get started in the conversation, could you just share a sentence about what you do and where you are?
Hi, I'm Mimi Plange. I'm a fashion designer, and I'm based right now in Harlem, New York.
Woohoo, Harlem! And Jomo?
Hi, my name is Jomo Tariku. I'm an industrial designer / furniture designer based out of Springfield, Virginia.
Got to give big ups to Springfield too now.
Yes.
So Mimi, we'll start with you. I really want to get into this conversation about how you find inspiration looking at the continent of Africa. We all know that Africa is quite a diverse continent, and there's just so many sources to be inspired by. But I wanted to hear more about some of your more recent works, and we'll start with your body modification. And could you tell us more about how that collection came about?
Yeah, so thank you, Africa Center. I'm so honored to be able to speak with you, Mulaney, and you, Jomo, today. Big fans of both of your work, so thank you guys. Scarification is something that I kind of was introduced to by my family. So my mom has a scar on her cheek. We're from Ghana. She got it when she was 13. And it was kind of like something that, I mentioned to her. I asked her about it, and she told me that, it was something that everyone in her village, she grew up in Abatifi in Ghana, and she said that everyone used to kind of get that mark. And it was kind of, core to the Ashanti tribe and the Ashanti people. And so it kind of stayed in the back of my mind. And just like as a young person going through fashion magazines, looking at different times when people were inspired by Africa, designers like Yves Saint Laurent and Dior and other designers, and looking at what they did. And for me, it was like kind of always based around like either prints or color or the Maasai tribe. And I felt like there was like so much more that, that was there. And I started looking into designs and what really rang a bell, like what really, resonated with me was starting to look at Africans before they were fully clothed, and so that was what I was interested in. I was interested in what they were doing with their bodies, the body painting, the scarifications, the tattooing, the body modifications, neck stretching, things like that were, happening. And so I came across scarification. I just thought it was amazing, and this was the time around 2007 before a lot of these things came into light with movies like, Black Panther, and everyone kind of like now embracing, what those, body augmentations were. And so the first collection that I kind of started focusing in on this and trying to represent a look of African inspiration in a way that was really modern and traditional, because I feel like at the end of the day, I was born in Ghana, but I've been here in the US since I was 5 years old. So I have to tell a true story that, that means, that represents me, and I'm in these two different places. And so I have to speak about fashion in that way. And so I wanted to bring the inspiration, but I also wanted it to be very, I mean, just modern, you know? And so the scarification is like leather work that's based off of skin. And so that's why I chose leather. And it's done with the trapunto technique, which is an old Italian stuffing technique, which is quilting, and then also stuffing yarns with different materials. You can even put pieces of like, you know, real rocks or stones or ropes and things like that. So this dress actually has ropes in it, and it also has like other fabric that's quilted inside of it, and it's all done by hand. And it was just really done to just, you know, talk about the beauty of the surface design on the skin, which I find to be beautiful. And I wanted the more of the historical aspects of what we were, because to me that's the original fashion. It's like the body,
Right.
and that's pretty much what I wanted to express in these works. And so it's really about telling a story that at the time not very many people were really talking about. And that was, for me, what fashion was before the cloth really was introduced all the way. And so that's where, you know, we started. And I just want to, you know, be able to share those stories in a new kind of way that like speaks to a lot of people around the world.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it creates a really a nice synergy between the stitching work that you talk about in the actual garment and the patterns on the body, and then thinking about how the fabric is yet on the body again. So it becomes another layer to our skin, and I think it just looks absolutely amazing. Hopefully, we could still have access to this dress. I know this is something that you created a while ago, but it's an amazing piece. So it's a work of art, really.
Thank you.
So bravo for that, Mimi.
Thank you.
And then your next piece, where we look at a piece that you worked on for an art show, right? Can you tell us more about, because this is really taking that same concept of the body modification, and now it's been exasperated in a different form. Because if we look at this, the detailing is quite different. Why is that? Did you use a similar stitching, and you could tell us more about that, how it was made?
So over time, I always wanted to keep expressing this idea of scarification, but I'm doing it differently every time. And it's not always scarification. I mean, there's African architecture in there, there's rituals in there, there's a lot of different elements that I'm putting together. And I'm also mixing a lot of different African cultures together. So it's not specifically one. Again, I feel like we're in a melting pot. I'm of the diaspora, and so I speak about my work in that way. I'm going to mix it all together. And here I wanted to do a new form. Time had passed. Like this item was made for On Guard NY. Like you said, it was an art show. This was in 2016, and this was done entirely with paint. So this was a leather jacket that we made, and then this was like layers and layers and layers of paint to create the height that you're seeing, and the different textures. And so it's like painting a little while, letting it, you know, rest, and then coming back to it and painting again. And so that's pretty much, you know, what we were trying to achieve. And it was still about scarification, but here it was more about, the first one was based off of like a more of a linear kind of style, but here it's more of like a keloid texture, which I didn't explain that scarifications are usually made with the cutting of the skin. Sometimes to raise the bumps, they either, you know, can sometimes rub like rocks inside or different things to make the texture higher. And so that's what I was trying to represent in this piece. So it's done entirely of like acrylic paint.
So how do you decide maybe the difference in the materials that you'll use to create these different effects? I mean, again, you mentioned how you wanted this height, and acrylic paint was the source, but how did you come to that, to figure that out?
I just felt like as a designer, you have to always be trying to kind of like innovate and do something new. And at that time I had done the trapunto embroidery several times in different ways, and I wanted to keep telling the story. And I don't know. I mean, for me, it's just a lot of research and just kind of like going to museums or seeing what other people do. And a lot of artists are inspirational in a lot of different ways. And even though I'm definitely not a painter at all, but I knew I had this vision of what I wanted to create. And I knew that it, you know, it needed to be done by hand, because that's part of the expression of what it is I'm trying to say. And it didn't have to have perfection at all. And the whole thing was like, you know, what scarring is in general is like, once it's on your skin, people have this feeling that you know, you are scarred some way and it means this thing, you're not perfect, but you know, the beauty is not in perfection. And that's not what I'm trying to seek at all. I'm trying to find the beauty in the imperfections. And so for me, there was this idea of, it was just kind of like just trying things, you know, like I said, I wasn't a painter, so I didn't really know. So some of it is also like plaster of Paris that's inside, you know, where the Unfashion is written. And so it was just like trying things and letting it dry. I wasn't sure where I was going, and this was for an art project anyway, so I felt like I could just take a chance. And to be honest with you, I didn't know the end result or how it was going to turn out, but it took a long time because it took a long time to get the layers with the painting, and I liked the direction that it was going in, so I just kind of kept going, and I felt like I can see texture here. It was all just about texture, and I just wanted to, like, you know, bring it up as much as possible, but I guess I do spend a healthy amount of time trying to think about how I can express texture, how can I express painting, how can I express, like, you know, these ideas, at least in the beginning of it. But now it's gone into more of like trying to think of how I can just express the feeling of what it is to have your own unique identity. Because another thing about scarification that I found, which was really unique, was that no one ever tried to have the same look on their body. And now we live in this world where not everyone, but, you know, there's like this whole idea of like being the same and like following trends and wanting to be like other people. But all of these bodies, they had their own uniqueness, and that was important. And so a lot of this is about like identity and the imperfection of, you know, just what it means to create beauty out of things that we typically don't seem in this culture today that we have, that we don't find to be beautiful.
Yeah, and I think it's really important what you said, Mimi, about really not knowing of what to expect, the exploration, and, you know, keeping that as a part of your practice. I think, you know, the more that we do that, and it's clear that your work is embedded in research, which is also important, by, you know, trying to find out more about how this practice is and what materials were used, and it's apparent in how you executed it. Talking about materials, I want to ask Jomo, who's, you know, his main material is wood. And I want to hear more from you, Jomo, as far as what does wood mean to you? I mean, when we think about culturally, you know, the amount of work or art that has been created from wood on the continent is tremendous, right?
Yes.
And for those of you who don't know, this chair that we're looking at now is called the Mido Chair, and it was recently acquired by the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And it's currently on display at the Afrofuturistic Period Room before we could fly. So Jomo, I want to hear, please share with our audience on this concept. It's clear that we could see a comb, and this is my assumption, but I'd love for you to tell us more about this concept and then your choice of material.
Sure. So when it comes to the concept, I'm glad. First of all, thank you to the Africa Center for hosting this event, and thank you, Maleni, and for us to be discussing about the contribution of our ancestors related to our work. And one thing I want to quickly say before I forget is how similar mine and Mimi's approach is to how we do design and how we base our work on what our ancestors have gifted us. So coming back to this specific chair, I mean, the Afro comb has been a very enduring symbol of you know, the Black is Beautiful movement in the U.S. Within Africa, and even here is a rite of passage. It's a part of your growing up. Your, you know, showing your straight hair is just as beautiful as whichever way you want to handle it. At some point in the history of definitely America, which was looked down to keep a straight Afro hair, and it still is in some places and at some jobs. So this specific chair embodies all of these things that I've thought about, and it is, you know, coming to the material. You've correctly stated it, Maleni. It has been used to do masks. It's used to make home utility, you know, things you need within the house, you know, your pots, your dishes, your other utensils within the home, even for weapons and so on. So wood is it's an intrinsic part of most sub-Saharan cultures, and of course, something that was abundantly found, and maybe in some areas less so today. So just trying to mix up how this concept developed was, yes, initially I did a sketch more that looked like an African hair pick that slowly transitioned, and over time, the part of me being an industrial designer started kicking in, saying, what can I tweak? What can I make it look elegant? Yes, part of it is the handle becomes a backrest, but I just didn't slap or move a hair comb that I saw to look exactly like a chair. So part of the process was we ended up using bent veneer. There is 16 layers of bent veneer to make this chair with my builder, David Bonhoff. We figured out a lot of things. We had to make, I think, about 6 or 7 molds. This thing is done in parts and then is glued with tenons. And expertly, the backrest also joins the front part of it. And even that joint is in the shape of a comb. And one of the fascinating things where this chair is part of the show, the Afrofuturistic Period Room, is unbeknown to me when my work was selected. The Seneca village that was in New York, where when they did archaeological dig, they ended up finding a comb. So it's one of those fascinating things that you work on something because it has meaning to you, to later on find out it actually means more than you initially thought. Because the sudden relationship was like a wow moment for me. But it combines all of this. So hopefully I've covered the questions you've asked me.
Oh yeah, very much so. And you know what came up, and this is for both of you, Jomo and Mimi, that there is a connection to slow processes that we forget as creatives being part of the quote unquote new world. And when we think of ancestry, our work was a slow process. When we think about, say, Hausa architecture, it wasn't built in one day. The pyramids, it wasn't built in a day. Even all of these different handworks that we have been gifted, as Jomo said earlier. And I think, I hope that we pay attention more to that now. And I want to get a sense, before we go on, Jomo or Mimi, about how creatives can getting back to having slow process, especially now that we're in such a fast world. And when I say fast fashion, fast furniture, fast anything, it's this immediacy. How can we slow down and come back to our roots and embrace some of these processes? Any advice for those who are contemplating?
If you want me to go first, specifically towards this chair has been in my mind from thinking about it to sketching to doing various versions of it, probably 8 to 10 years. Of course, one of the bottlenecks was just production cost. But in the meantime, what that has made me do, talking about slowness, is for me to go back and look at it. And I wish, I think if you go to my Instagram page, you can see where it started and where it ended up, is refinement to a point that made me say, I've nailed it. No more changes. This is how it should be. I'm glad it took its time. Glad I didn't have the money to do the first one, because I wouldn't have been happy with it. Because that was just, it's kind of not, if you ask me, the way I practice is I don't go with the first attempt that I do. I just leave it in my sketchbook. I keep drawing, pass it on. And when there is time, I go back and revise it and say, it even gives me time to do fusion of elements from one culture or from one approach. And time does have a way of fixing, design, where, at least from the designer's point of view, what you think is producing a masterpiece. If it is, I have an idea, or I saw it on a book, here I sketch, then I 3D print, then I make. I think that loses the time that you need to go back and forth with your design and have a dialogue between yourself, even with people that are around you, even critics of your work, to have a dialogue with it and say, okay, now it's matured. It's it's like the mature version of yourself that you're producing at the end.
Mimi, would you want to speak on that, embracing time as part of our traditions and, part of your practice? You're on mute, Mimi, sorry.
Get off mute. Okay. I would say, first of all, this chair is definitely perfection. So I mean, I'll definitely say that. And it definitely looks like it took the time, to get there. And I would say over time, being a fashion designer and first getting into it and seeing how our schedules run, we're constantly producing, constantly. You have to have your collections done at a certain time and all that stuff. Now, for us, around 2013, 2014, we stopped that. But when you stop that, it also takes you out of that mainstream culture of the fashion world. And that was something that we were willing to risk, because at the end of the day, for me, I just feel like there's a lot of clothes in the world, a lot. And it's like, what are we doing every season? Bringing out all these things over and over and over and over again. And if you're more thoughtful about your work, you can create masterpieces, really. You can create these things if you're more thoughtful, if you're thinking about what you want to do, and if you're taking your time. And it's not about quantity, but making a few pieces that can actually put yourself out there in a real way, in a respectable way, and allow your work to really shine. And so for me, it was just being in a very fast industry, but then deciding to pivot. But I mean, if you follow any of the fashion news or what's going on, you see that a lot of designers have decided to slow down and maybe we do maybe 1, maximum 2 collections a year, but 1 is okay, and that's fine, because we're trying to create things that have a lasting impression. We're trying to create things that have meaning. And we're not just making clothes, so it has to be there, I think, for you to have your thought process correct and for you to have a reason why you're designing. Because if there's not a reason why you're doing what you're doing, then it just becomes stuff at the end of the day. Stuff that you can get rid of, stuff that, you'll wear, maybe 10 times and then throw away or something. But if you really love and cherish these things, I just think that there's a healthy balance. Because for me, I know that I don't consider fashion design to really be art. So there has to be a little bit of a functionality in what it is that you're doing. But I think when you slow down, you can give yourself more meaning into what it is that you're doing, and that's the reason for its existence is actually what's important, more so than the thing that you've actually designed. And trying to find out things about, for us, the consumer and their needs, what is it like? If it's just a beautiful dress, there's a lot of those. There's a lot of talented designers. There's a lot of all that stuff. So if you're competing in that way, it's going to be very difficult. You're just going to be playing a game of favoritism, or what it is, like someone choosing you. Excuse my little friend here. So I knew she was going to do that at some point. And so, but the thing is, if you're really creating something that you want to last and for it to make an impression while you're no longer here on this earth, I just think it's going to take time, and it's going to take, a lot of dedication and, thought process.
Yeah. So Jomo, I know time is something that you've truly embraced with creating your collection, because it takes time to make furniture. And in your next slide, which is the Bharati Stool Nyala Chair, excuse me, the Nyala Chair, which is another one of your pieces that I want you to tell the audience about it, because it's amazing how this piece is made, and the amount of research and time that you had to take to figure out how to create that backrest, how to make a 3-legged chair. If you notice, it's only 3 legs. So Jomo, share one about the inspiration, and also about, again, paying attention to those details, which I think is so important when we talk about working from the gifts that our ancestors have given us, and the source and the focus of what contemporary African design can look like. Jomo.
Sure. So from the get-go, I'll tell you, I am just obsessed by the whole 3-legged stools that I grew up with. And these are stools that, just by the nature of how these are done in most African countries, they're made by unknown craftspeople. but they're just amazing pieces you can have at home. So I have my obsession also has led to, even when I design chairs, I do lean towards trying to get my sketches to start from three-legged chairs. So if that doesn't work, I'll go to four, like the Mido have as many. But it is, it started from there. Again, talk about time. It is years, not years, but just doing sketches. And I do thumbnail sketches of anything that I see that relates to any sub-Saharan culture, heritage, wildlife. This is based on the Nyala antelope and this horn. So I've sketched these ideas, and again, I go back, refine, add things. No, I don't like it. I do like it. So it goes through this metamorphosis of the shape just building up and changing over time. I'm not sure how long this took. This probably, I would say, a year, just within my sketchpad of just mulling it over, until I got to this shape. And I remember doing a 3D model. Then we did the very first prototype. Again, with the same builder who worked on the Mido chair. That prototype pretty much told us what kind of joints to do, how to use material, how not to be wasteful about it, how the armrest is going to be made, because this is hand carved. The armrests are how to how to do the seat. The seats are 3 pieces that are designed like an eye drop that are glued together with a tenon. And again, they're book matched. On this one, on the black one, you can't see the split on the backrest. Part of it is split and again book matched. What this process has also made it is that on the natural finished one, the natural beauty of that wood we were talking about and what it means within the African culture pops out. You see the grain, the beauty of the wood coming through that. And the way this chair hugs you is, Melanie, you've been with me at a show and people would come and, they roll their finger on it. Then the first question is, can we sit on it, or is this an art piece? So as a designer, that is one of those satisfying things to hear also, yeah, because people think it's artistic enough, they think they shouldn't sit on it. But again, as an industrial designer, talking about what we do in this generation to pass on is for it to be, at least for me, to be a functional art piece. So from construction to how I also dialogue with my builder on what I want out of it. I remember saying, you can barely see it here, but the bottom, for example, curves a little bit and it tapers towards the inside. Something probably most people wouldn't see until you flip the chair. But those kind of details and attention to how to make these chairs gives me satisfaction, even though most people might not see that I've put in that detail into it. And you see similar things on objects that we relate to from Africa. I mean, one example I keep giving is the coffee pot that we use back home. The coffee ceremony is a big deal. But that ornate coffee pot that we use that is made out of clay is there to be used. So it's functional. But at the end, when you finish it, you put it on your mantle and it becomes a decorative item. So it's utilitarian. At the same time, it's a piece of art to decorate your space, and you use it every day. And if it breaks tomorrow, you go replace it, and the process continues. So, and this comes from probably 100 years of culture that got passed on, where most objects within the African home serves a dual purpose, and that's how I approach my objects too.
Well, what you're saying, Jomo, is you and Mimi, I mean, you're both building on the legacy of creating functional art, functional pieces. Mm-hmm. And Mimi, I want to hear from you as far as understanding that we're building on these legacies. And with that, building on those legacies brings a sense of confidence, right? Where you know that we've been gifted all of these materials, these processes. And so then what's next? How do we continue to create a visual language that speaks to us as being part of the diaspora, like here in America or wherever we are, that we're outside of the continent, yet still connected? And on your next slide, where is this where we talk about this is your latest spring collection, Love Unfashion, correct?
Yes.
And this is where I feel that you're starting to push or, address some of these questions of how do I continue to push what these gifts were given to us to another level so it creates another language. And I would love for you to share more on that.
Well, I would say that in the beginning, when I first began, I knew that I wanted to reflect. I wanted to put this beauty of Africa out there, and I was thinking of like, the scarification and like the direction of the lines. I was a lot more detailed into what I was looking at and trying to represent. And now that the first slide that you saw, that was from 2009, and now this collection is 2020, and the evolution of the design has changed. I don't feel like a lot of times, I've been on panels where people are like, well, how do you put make sure that you have the African into your work, or how do you make sure that you're always displaying yourself? And I think you have to understand that you don't have to really pressure yourself to do certain things. I mean, I'm still telling those stories. I want to express them, but just by the nature of who I am and where I was born and where I'm at right now, whatever I design is going to have all of this in it, because I think that people are just, at the end of the day, you are a product of your environment, in so many ways. And so it doesn't have to be something that's stressed. You're doing it anyway. It doesn't have to look a certain way. It doesn't have to be an African print. It doesn't have to be it's your work. It's coming out of you, and it's your answers. It's already there, so that part of it already exists. And so for me, the design evolution kind of came from, this place of not being so literal. Not that I was that literal, but, just freeing myself up enough to now think of, how do I express just the idea in a very, it's just the idea. It doesn't have to be, because it's scarification, it has to be lines. And because it's this, it has to be like, not designing in that way anymore. But like, this, for instance, like, I was thinking a lot about, just the idea of African masquerade, the big, dresses that they wear, and the big, over the top, like straw things, and just being consumed by a lot of fabric, and what it means to, move around in this space, and like, this cocoon and this shell. And so it's just now becoming a designer in a way that, you're thinking more so of the idea of the people that you're designing for, and what it is that's resonating with them, and then putting touches of yourself into it. And so I don't think there's any one way to go. I think as a designer, there's a lot of different directions that you can flow in. But for me, I've now just graduated to a place where I talk about it and I'm looking at it in a way that is very just of the world right now, And I think that if the work can't live outside of, like, if we're trying to teach people things, we have to, show people beyond like the people that look like us, how do they enter into our world? How do we create things that resonate all around, so that someone in Japan can look at something that I designed and be like, oh my God, I love this. And someone that lives in Australia can look at it and be like, oh my God, I love this. Because we can't put ourselves in the world without sharing ourselves with everyone. And everyone has to be able to see what we do and fall into it. That shouldn't be limited, in my opinion, because that's the only way to grow it out there. So that's not such an obscure thing. It's not like, oh, well, this is like, no, this is design, and yes, it's inspired by Africa, but it's also great design. And I think that that's the thing that you always have to, that has to come first. And, your inspiration, everything is there too. But I think that, your design aesthetic and what it is that you're actually creating, the balance of it. Is it something that somebody, wants? Is it something that somebody can use? Like, never forget the design principles, but you are actually just taking your inspirations and putting them into that. So for me, that's a very important part of it. And to elevate like what you've already seen, and to not really recreate what you've already seen, but to elevate it, to create something different, to give somebody a different conversation and make people think,
Yeah, I think that's so important, Mimi. I think for those young people who are listening and are challenging themselves, or they want to challenge themselves to embrace their culture on various levels. Because when we think about if we think about our experience as Black people across the diaspora, understanding the source is Africa, but we have the Caribbean, we have America, we have the Americas. And so I hear from many young people, and I wonder if you get the same question, how do I start? And it's clear, Mimi, that there has been an evolution. You know, you started with your research, and I'm curious as to what you could share. If there's one step you could share for the young people who are trying to figure out, I want to embrace my African heritage, my culture. I really want to put it in my work, but I don't know how. And then the other side is, I don't know if it's going to be accepted. But it's clear that you've made a decision.
Yeah, you know, I think that great design will be accepted. You know, great design will be accepted. You know, that's what I think. Like it, and I think to not approach it from wanting to be accepted, you know, because I think when you do that, you're also bringing your power down a little bit, that somebody has to accept your work.
Yes.
It's your work. And I just think that you have to push yourself to really create things that are unique. I think it's very difficult, like to create something that's unique and also, you know, has a reference point. I think the way that I would start would just be to do something, you know, first. And like, I mean, and like Jomo said, I wouldn't think that the first thing that you create is the most amazing thing, because every time I start, my collection never ends up the way that I started, never. And so it always goes through a lot of different cycles. You know, you put it down. Sometimes I just need to like not look at it for a couple days too, and then come back. But I think that just design in a way that's a little more fearless, and don't assume about how people are going to take your work right away, because that may limit you. Try to just do what it is that you want to do, and do real research. Don't live on the surface of things. Try to go deep and find, like, to me, I've been to Ethiopia, I've been to Nigeria, I've been to all these, I've been to South Africa, I've been to Ivory Coast, and I always go to a museum when I'm in Africa. And I try to just see, because I just think that there's so much there that we haven't even touched upon. You know, there's so much there that we're not even like, we don't know anything about. And for me, the inspirations come from, I think stories are inspirations. Like, I'm trying to even think of how I can, like, there's all these Ghanaian stories about, you know, Anansi the spider and all these things. And I'm like, I want to reinterpret those into collections, you know, in the future one day. But I'm like, there's like the stories, there's like, why did these rituals happen? And I mean, I started on the surface of the skin, but it's a lot deeper than that, you know, and I haven't even traveled all that way. But I think you got to do research. You got to give the respect to the place, not just wake up one day and say, oh, I want to do this. Like, everybody, you know, we know about the prints. We know about, you know, now we know about the scarifications and all that stuff. But what is something that we don't know yet that you can bring to light? You know, and I think if you can come at it from that angle and still understand that it's a business, okay, so it's not about you just doing whatever you want to do. Like, it has to still resonate with people. And just do something, you know, like, I think my biggest thing would just be, try not to have a lot of fear. There's always going to be some there. And then also, don't try to think about what the end user is going to think or how they're going to feel or who's going to look at, because you don't know. You know, you don't know how other people feel about stuff. So when you start doing that, you're going to start putting limitations on yourself, because you're going to start being like, well, maybe I shouldn't do this because of this and this. But if you focus on having great design, I think everything will come together.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's clear in your next slide, you show us what it's like to be a fearless designer. I think this is a great example. This was taken shot at the Africa Center.
This was shot at the Africa Center, and we were so excited to shoot this particular collection here, because this was a very pivotal collection. This was when we first came up with this whole idea of what it means to be unfashion. And for us, it was like, you know, not being in the norms and having your own identity and not being a follower and, you know, having this uniqueness. And here again, like, we were looking at, you know, the Nuba tribe, and And we were also using a lot of details that were hand-painted language systems. And so the background artwork was Victor Ekpuk's like work that he does. And I don't think it's there any longer because I think he does like seasonal kind of like painted work and then it disappears. But we were lucky to be able to capture this this particular group of, you know, work that he did because I felt like it really reflected our thing is like what we were talking about is like creating a new language, you know? And so here it's like we're getting a chance to mix everything together. We're talking about, you know, the piercings, that's where you're seeing the little studs and then the neon, the little spikes that are hanging out. And for me, I've always found kind of a connection between what I call is like, when I look at the African bodies that I'm interested in, to me, it's like punk. You know, so a lot of times, like, there's a little bit of a punk element into what I'm doing because I think those were the original rebels. You know, those are the original rebels doing whatever to, you know, to their bodies and the piercings. And now and it's become this thing where a lot of people think of, when they think of punk, they think of British punk, but which exists as well too. And so it's kind of like putting those cultures together. And here we have the scarification bag, which, you know, now it's starting to look more I don't want to say mass, but it's just the ideas are now becoming a little more wearable than in the beginning times when it was like mostly leather that I was working with. I started using like mesh materials, softer materials. And so it's just talking about how you can create African design that looks really modern. That's not what anyone would think of. And it opens a conversation. That's all I want. Like, I just want people to look at something and love it for what it is, not even knowing where my inspiration comes from. And then when they find out later, they're like, oh, you know, and that's really what I'm trying to capture in my work.
Well, it's apparent and it looks amazing. And Jomo, I think you have a synergy with what Mimi is talking about with reimagining
Definitely.
how we take a seat. And so on next slide, talking about your stool, the Bharati stool.
Yes.
And please share with the audience, what is Bharati? Where is that coming from? And then how it relates to this piece as a seat.
Mm-hmm. So Bharati and this type of it is the inspiration is from headrests that are found throughout sub-Saharan Africa, but this specific one was from the Oromia region of Ethiopia. And the purpose of a headrest, especially if you are a nomad or if you happen to be traveling, is wherever you need to rest, you can just use it, you know, lean it against your neck. And to also make sure if you have any fancy hairdo, it doesn't get ruined. So if you have an afro or, you know, if you have a cornrow or any type of, you know, hair pattern, you don't want it to touch the ground and get messed up. So that was the inspiration. And how I got to here is, in a way, how Mimi has been explaining about how her process. You look at these things. I went through a phase where I was looking at all these different objects and, you know, the things we've been discussing, what inspires us. But I decided to draw only the silhouettes of these objects, not to get in, you know, focused or get, you know, into the patterns and the details. I'll just do simple drawings, simple sketches, and so on and so on. But at some point, you know, again, this is the industrial designer side of me saying, you know, how do I make it functional? How do I produce it? Do I make it out of solid wood? And we were going through this exercise with my brother saying, okay, your chairs are pretty high end. They're very laborious. They take time. What can you create that is, you know, maybe machine produced? So unlike the other one, which is totally handmade, this one is, the patterns are cut using a CNC machine. It is height adjustable. It is something that could be, you know, look very industrial, industrial looking. It could fit in a mid-modern century home, but it also can fit with your, you know, with your small pillow that has African patterns on it. People can, you know, people who know what a headrest is can quickly associate with it. So if you're an African and you've seen one of these from your culture, then you probably will say, this thing has the silhouette shape of a headrest. And if you don't know nothing about it, like Mimi said, it's a conversation piece. You know, how did you get to this? Why did you make it height adjustable? You know, because, you know, you get two options. That's why it has two holes. It is what makes it unique. It's just not one solid piece that you can't do nothing with. The doggone one again is based on. There is a very simple stool that I found researching on a book and reflecting back to what Mimi said about research. Look, my journey into modern African furniture didn't start 5 years ago. Started as a thesis project in my industrial design program. That is back 92, 93. And again, I want to go back to what Mimi said. I didn't care what people thought. All I said was this industry needs it. No one, no one is doing it. Other people are defining what African design is in the furniture or the home decor world. And I said, the same thing again, what Mimi said about authenticity, that you that grew up with these cultural references can bring into design. Added on that, your Western education or things you've learned with new technologies on how to produce things is my work is a merger of these two. I don't want to call it diametrically opposite, but these two things, handmade versus machine made, 3D versus this and that, and this is the end result of all of those.
Well, it's clear that both of you have created a body of work that really reflects on the experience that we're having now, today, in this contemporary world. And I'm curious more about sharing more about the legacy that you're building, and that what do you want your legacy to be? What's the mark that you want to leave? Because it's clear that you're making this mark now. And I'm curious how you're building on that and what you would share with our audience of what mark you want to leave on this world.
You want to go first, Gemma?
Either one.
Yeah, I can. And this is a topic we have discussed, Nalini, on other platforms. And it really matters to me, legacy-wise, because my work is built on the footsteps of what others have done. If I didn't have those cultural references and objects, and even the new idea that Mimi just gave me about looking at, stories, which I've not thought about stories, all these amazing children's stories that I've heard growing up. I've never put those into my design work. And all of that is, I am a continuation of what our ancestors have done throughout the centuries. The Mido Chair is based on, African comb have been around 6,000 years. So the first one that was discovered in Sudan is that old. So we are a part of that long timeline. I'm hoping that I'm leaving a small contribution to this from my perspective of how we can move on and bring this rich history and culture we have that we're so proud of, but interpreting it as a furniture designer. So I'm hoping that legacy is what I leave. And of course, once I've been gone for a while, and kids and designers in the future will look at this and do what I did to the other ones that gave me inspiration and say, okay, then I'll take this and I'll take it to the next level, or I'll fuse it with something else, because we've added more into this design vocabulary or design language that we've left here, and something new will show up in a few years.
So Mimi, how do we build on this design language, this visual language that we're creating? I'm very curious to hear from you too.
I agree with everything that Jomo said. Like, obviously, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't the people before me that were here to, inspire me to get to this point. And I think one of the first things that, we can do is, I often see people say, oh, there's no Black designers, but when we say there's no, that's so absolute. And I feel like that's very disrespectful to all the people who've been here before us. It's very disrespectful. We should not say there's none. Like, we would like to see more, yes. But to say that there's none, I feel like you give a disregard to everyone else that's left a foundation for us to build upon. And so that's number one. And understanding that, like, it comes from, for me, like a love of self. Like, that's why you want to express it, because you think it's so good that it needs to be out there in the world. And so a lot of it, the designing that we do, and for us, the legacy is to build a global brand. That's what we want to do, and so that is what our goal is. We've been in business now. This is going on our 13th year, that we've been in business for a long time. And, this is not any kind of overnight sensation. This is, to me, work and work. We look at brands and we think, oh, we want to be like, these brands have been around for like a century already, basically. Right. And so, and trying to compare yourself to them, like you're trying to build something that, people can trust. People trust your quality, people trust, your thought process, like we talked about earlier, and all the things that you put into everything that you do. And so the legacy is to create something that people can, come back to, a place where, you're trying to do a lot of things. Like these things can get so big. We can get so big that, we can have money to have, production facilities in different places in Africa. And then you're also helping the economies there. Like it's bigger. Think bigger than you could have ever thought. Like that's what I've, seen. Like, the dream is not just to be a designer, not just to have like, think bigger than that, to be the person creating things and the person making the moves and the person hiring new designers and the person, creating jobs and the person doing those things so that more of us can be here, And so I think that, legacy wise, I hope that we can inspire people, because for me, my whole thing is like, for the person who had nothing, to get to this point, I think that that's what I'm trying to show. Like this, the way that I came into it wasn't because of anyone I knew or, having money or anything. The struggle was really, really, really real, and it still is. And so, but it's like, despite all of that, you can still get there. And of course it's going to be hard. And of course life is not fair. And of course all those things are always going to be there. But all the cheesy things that people say when they get up there and win awards about you have to believe in yourself. It is so true though. It's really hard to believe in yourself. Like there's a lot of distractions going around all the time, to try to keep you from it. But you have to believe in yourself and understand. And once that's there, even though there'll be obstacles in your way, nothing will stop you, and because it doesn't make sense. Like most of the time, like we ran our company, we basically ran it from the couch, but we've done it, so it's like, don't allow the limitations, because they're noise and they're distractions to keep you from getting to where you want to go. And so as long as you can understand that, I think you'll get there.
Well, Mimi, Jomo, I want to thank you. You continue to make the ancestors proud, and we see both of you on a global scale. I see it for both of you on many levels. I want to thank the Africa Center for having this conversation, and I hope that everyone realize and learn, be fearless, take your time, slow down, do your research, and believe in yourself. That is the message for today. And so thank you. Any last words, Mimi or Jomo?
No, thank you for hosting us.
Yes.
I have one more question. So Mimi, where can we get those glasses?
On mimiplonge.com, you can find our new eyewear that we actually did in collaboration with a designer who's from Kenya. And her name is Carol Muthinga, and she's very, very talented and amazing. And she's based in Paris right now. So she actually did our eyewear for us. So she's amazing.
Oh, it looks amazing. And Jomo, where can people find you?
You can find me either at jomofurniture.com or jomotariku.com. One is a shopping cart, or on Instagram, of course.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It was great listening to both of you.
Thank you.
Home isn't just where we're from. It's the sounds that move us, the stories that shape us, and the flavors that heal us. It's the communities that connect us, the ones that hold us down, the ones that raise us up. Home is a feeling we all know. So if you're looking for it, you can always find it here. The Africa Center. Home is here.